Greetings, everyone. This is Jed Schlackman. I'm a holistic therapist and spiritual energy healer in Miami, Florida. In this short presentation, I would like to speak about the topic of duality and non-duality, and perhaps how those two ideas can be reconciled or integrated. In spiritual teachings, we see the theme of non-duality being very common in some of the Eastern traditions. So this idea of a non-dual source or self, the absolute or the oneness. In some other types of spiritual traditions, there's more of a focus on duality, things like good versus evil, dark versus light. And so in our human experience, we can look at how both of those levels of reality are relevant, how both the dualistic and the non-dual levels of reality support or complement one another. In our everyday physical environment, really everything is based upon the principle of duality. So there's this perception that things are separate, that each self is individuated and somehow different from each other self. We deal with polarities like male and female, dark and light, positive and negative, and so on. However, we can understand the concept that all of those polarities, all of those vibrational forms of existence exist within a greater source field, one unified field of consciousness, one unified energy source. And so that would imply that whatever we perceive as duality actually exists within a greater non-duality, a greater oneness or isness. When we try to live only in one of those levels of reality, we may be neglecting something important that is accessed from the other level. If we only focus on the dualistic level, then we forget that ultimate source that we all come from, and we can become overly attached to whatever dualistic positions or identities that we've embodied ourselves with. On the other hand, if we only identify with the oneness, with that undifferentiated source, then we're not really able to function and have any discernment or any experience really in the physical dualistic realm. We're immersed in this human experience here not for the purpose of connecting with oneness, but with the purpose of experiencing all the possibilities that are inherent in duality, experiencing the extremes of polarity and balancing them, experiencing different elements and archetypes and balancing those as well. Thus, it's important for us to integrate both those viewpoints, the dualistic and the non-dualistic, to realize that in a sense both are true. Both support and enhance one another. That one source gets to know itself more completely by fragmenting itself and then having those different fragments, those different expressions of itself go through a field of potential experiences and, in a sense, reintegrate or reconnect into a greater awareness of wholeness. This may be something that's difficult for our linear conscious mind to wrap itself around. However, if we were to be in that state of higher awareness, we might be able to perceive and understand how all those different experiences are contributing toward that greater awareness, that greater sense of wholeness. For those of you that are struggling with something in your life where things seem very out of balance or very extreme, it can be helpful to pause and tap into that source, that one essence, to let that spiritual source help realign and rebalance you. For those of us that may have a hard time dealing with things in this reality, in this dualistic experience, we do want to be cautious not to be overly detached, not to try to spiritually escape from life, but to integrate that understanding and that spiritual source with whatever we might be going through, with whatever challenges we might be confronting in this world of duality, in this world of polarities and different archetypal patterns. I hope that this discussion has given some of you ideas about how you can bring spiritual concepts together in your life, about how both the dualistic and non-dualistic perspectives have value and significance. It's important for us to remember that any idea or concept can be better understood through exploring and experiencing its contrast. So if we have a concept of oneness, that concept isn't really completely understandable unless we experience separation and fragmentation. Once we've experienced that and then brought those fragments, those separate selves, back into their source, then that source has a better awareness of self, a better awareness of its own potential. Sometimes what we see or understand will change depending on how we focus our perspective or point of view. A simple practical example of this would be if we were to take a lens or some type of microscope, telescope, to look at a particular object. Depending on how much we zoom in or zoom out, what we are perceiving can dramatically change. If we're here standing on this planet Earth and directing our focus toward the ground, we will see only that particular section of matter that exists there on the Earth in that particular spot. If we bring our awareness up into the sky, up into the atmosphere, out into space beyond the Earth, and then look down upon the Earth, we will see something much different. We'll see this sphere, and we'll be able to perceive how it appears as its wholeness. If we were to zoom out even much further, the Earth would begin to appear more like just a point of light or dot. So if we consider that idea with anything that we're observing, sometimes the closer that we look, the less we see, or the more we see, depending on what level of reality we're aiming at or attempting to explore. Therefore, I would like us to consider that in the spiritual context, where we can look at things at a dualistic level or a non-dualistic level, and we'll get to understand and appreciate things differently depending on which level we're looking at. If we're looking at the oneness, we can appreciate ideas of harmony, unity, light, and love. If we're looking at the duality, we can explore different types of relationships, the interactions between different elements, between different archetypes. So it's a lot more dynamic. There's a lot more activity going on, a lot more to experience on the dualistic level. And there's nothing right or wrong about either level. When we do attach to a particular identity or perspective, we will start to judge or evaluate things based upon that reference point. So if you are here as a human being on Earth and you value life strongly, then you will see from your perspective that people killing people would be something negative or bad from your perspective. However, from the oneness, from the non-dual perspective, it's ultimately all neutral. So everything that's happening on the Earth is just an experience from that perspective. There's nothing to fear, nothing to judge or blame. Everything just is what it is. It is that particular expression, that particular experience. And you as an individual point of awareness are providing your subjective viewpoint about that, your particular meaning that you're giving to it. This is a lot for some of us to process because we are used to being very attached to a particular identity, to certain values and beliefs and priorities. That's okay. However, in some way it is limiting. It's keeping us from being fully aware of a greater perspective, from being fully in harmony with that higher source, what we might call that oneness. So I encourage each of you to play with these different perspectives, to expand your consciousness, to let go of limitations, to release your attachment to whatever identity you may presently have, to whatever beliefs, whatever perspectives you may attach yourself to at the moment. And I wish you all a wonderful journey, a wonderful adventure through your life, through your existence. Namaste.